issues, because if we're going to require, as I said, some sort of ID to have access to the fundamental right that I continue to hear, we as a body should ensure that every individual has, that either those IDs are defined in statute or we're providing an identification card for all individuals. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Larson, Senator Moorfield, and Senator Howard, I believe. Is that correct? Mr. Clerk.
Well, Mr. President, Senator Larson would move to amend the bill with AM 2115.
Senator Larson, you're welcome to open on AM 2115.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I said, and I'll pull, I don't have my iPad with me, or else I'd pull up the committee amendment, but I'm sure a number of people are in the queue to get ready to talk now. And I'll have a chance to look at how encompassing the Judiciary Committee amendment was that nearly everybody in this body voted for, to show an ID, to ensure that those that don't have an ID have the ability to get access to health care when they need it. Will a pharmacy accept a student ID? Will a pharmacy accept just a Social Security card with no picture on it? I don't know. Well, Senator Keene yielded a question. He was talking about the Sudafed. I'll ask him.
Senator Keene, would you please yield? Senator
Keene, when somebody goes to buy the Sudafed behind the counter, what type of ID do most pharmacists require? Do they accept anything? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. It's not trying to get you.
Well, I do, so I will pull up the Sudafed statute and I will read it from Nebraska statutes. It says, and the customer shall display a valid driver's license or operator's license, a Nebraska state identification card, a military identification card, an alien registration card, or a passport as proof of identification, which is the exact same language contained in the amendment we just adopted.
Okay, thank you. So it doesn't appear that, actually I'll ask you another question. Out of all those identifications, I guess I don't know about the government one. I'd have to ask Senator Christ if it costs money to get a government ID or a military ID, because I don't know. But of all the other ones, would it cost an individual to obtain one of those identifications?
Well, I would assume so, but Senator Larson, you're quite frankly
Senator
so
Keene.
Far off base on this comparison.
I appreciate that answer, Senator Keene, in terms of every one of the IDs. Like I said, I don't know about the military identification. I don't know if that costs. I didn't serve in our military, and I'm sure others that have will inform me whether or not that military ID costs money. But I think the point comes back is we continue to hear from individuals like Senator Moorfield on this floor that one of the main reasons to go against voter ID is the cost of access to people displaying their fundamental right of voting. Now, I understand Senator Moorfield said that health care isn't a fundamental right in the Constitution, and he may have caught my meaning as he was as going off in that line of questioning. But in the end, under currently written, there is the ability that people will be denied prescribed medicines because they do not have a valid ID as we prescribed in statute. It's as simple as that. And I think there's a difference, because maybe when we did the Sudafed statutes, I believe I was here, it might have been my very first year when we did those. Sudafed, I don't think it's a prescribed medication, but in the end, these are prescribed medications. I understand the necessary reasons to have an ID. I understand what they're trying to get at, but in the end, they will be denying people access to medical care if they require an ID, and that individual cannot afford an ID. So, if it fits on one foot, that essentially when you go to the polls and we require an ID, that individual will still get a vote, they'll still have a provisional ballot, they'll check their they'll go back, they'll check their residence, and their vote can count. But in this, it's my understanding, as written, and maybe I'll be corrected and we can go through it, and anybody that doesn't have an ID will be able to get it, but that's not my understanding of the amendment, that if you can't afford one, you will be denied. And that pharmacy, if you want to say whether it's the Shopko pharmacy in O'Neill or I think the Walgreens pharmacy in Lincoln, that pharmacy technician, I doubt they're going to risk, whether it's their license or anything else, to get access or to just give these medications to someone that doesn't have an ID. So we continue to hear in voter ID over and over again that we have to provide a free ID to ensure everybody has access. That's what AM 2115 does. Anybody that requests an ID will get one at no cost to ensure that every Nebraskan, every single Nebraskan, has access to the critical health care that many have stated on this floor is a fundamental right. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Larson. Senator Moorfield. Senator Christ, you're recognized.
I yield my time, Senator Moorfield.
Senator Moorfield, 455.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Christ. I have to congratulate Senator Larson on some grade A trolling this morning. That being said, there's a few things that need to be corrected for the record. First, I've never said health care is a fundamental right. I've said that it should be a fundamental right. And if people like Senator Larson, who are hypocrites that get up on the floor and talk about actually caring about that, would actually do something about it, then it might be a fundamental right, and his arguments may hold some kind of legal weight. Second, there has to be a compelling state interest to impede upon any fundamental right. And I would say thousands of people dying from opiate overdoses, many of which are family members in this body, is a compelling state interest. So even if it was a fundamental right, despite my best efforts and despite people like Senator Larson not caring about affordable health care for people in Nebraska, then there would be a compelling state interest to actually put some restrictions on this, unlike voter ID, when people simply aren't being impersonated at the polling locations, which means that there isn't a compelling state interest. What a bunch of nonsense. And what a bunch of nonsense for Senator Larson to get up on this floor and bring up this issue, which is like comparing apples to oranges, both from a legal and a logical point of view, when we're talking about Nebraskans that are dying every single day from opiate overdoses, many of which go unreported. Now, Senator Larson wants to make the requirements for the identification to be a little bit more broader and to provide free IDs in order to make it easier to get it, then that sounds great. I'll probably support that amendment. But this is comparing apples to oranges, colleagues. And it's nice that Senator Larson showed up this morning to come up here and talk about that and to use this out of all examples as the example he could make about his desire to make it so that it's harder for people to vote. Disgraceful. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Moorfield. Senator Christ. Senator Howard, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I unfortunately rise in opposition to AM 2115, but want to maybe throw in a few clarifying points based on AM 1849 from the Judiciary Committee. The first one is that the list of IDs in Senator Keene's bill is a driver's license, a state ID, a military ID, an alien ID, or a passport. But it also doesn't apply to individuals who are living in facilities. So if you're low income or you're geriatric and you're in an assisted living or a nursing home facility, this ID requirement wouldn't apply to you. The other piece is that I alluded to some changes that we'll be working on with the Pharmacy Association on Select. And one of those issues is that pharmacists would like to have an exception if they know a patient, which is actually very common when we're considering statutes such as this. There are about 24 other states that have implemented ID requirements when you're picking up opioids. And so in Florida, it says if the person to whom medication is dispensed has no picture ID, the pharmacist should confirm their identity and document on the back of the prescription. Hawaii is very similar. And so that's something that we wanted to work out with the Pharmacy Association on Select. So while I appreciate Senator Larson bringing this issue to the fore, and I hope he appreciates that that we are as a team working on this issue in terms of how do we make sure that if a pharmacist has a regular relationship and a dispensing relationship with an individual, that they wouldn't necessarily need an ID. That being said, I know there were some questions about cost, and there's no cost for a military ID or an alien registration card. And in Nebraska, I think we've all discussed this before, the cost is between $750 and $1650 for a driver's license. An ID card is $24 and it lasts for 5 years. But I do think that the institutional exception, the facility exception, as well as the language that we're working on with the Pharmacy Association in regards to a prior and ongoing dispensing relationship should address Senator Larson's concerns. And so at this point, I would rise in opposition to AM 2115, and I appreciate the body's attention to this issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Howard. Senator Keene, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. I rise in opposition to AM 2115. Senator Howard is much more diplomatic and polite than I am. I'm going to apologize to the people of Nebraska watching this. If you have any question as to why people hate politicians, it's stunts like this that devalue the work that we're trying to do each and every day. And this is all it is a stunt. And I'm going to call it for what it is, because it is disturbing and counterproductive in every way. So I want to point out a couple of issues regarding the language, and I appreciate Senator Moorfeld saying this is comparing apples to oranges. It's more like comparing apples to honeybees. We're talking about completely different organisms here when we're comparing the idea of registration with looking at a photo